Anytime you meet an emergency or a frightening situation, your heart will beat faster because adrenaline pours in the bloodstream to get you ready for the emergency. That's why your heart beats faster. So on Valentine's Day, don't send a Valentine saying my heart beats for you. Say my adrenals shoot for you.
All right, before I even say hi to you, there's one thing that many home-based independent podcasters experience at some time during their podcasting lives, and that is that they record an entire episode and realize they never hit the record button on their digital audio workstation. I've never done that, although this is the second time I'm recording this preamble. And you know why? It's because the recording stopped after about half a second. I don't know why, but thankfully the preamble is not very long. Spoiler alert, that means I'm getting down to the episode pretty quickly. What episode? Episode 28. 28 of what podcast? Well, you downloaded this podcast, you're streaming it. You should already know. It's my weird record collection. If you hit the wrong thing by mistake, well, guess what? You're listening to my weird record collection now. And my name is Sean, and I'm talking to you from the north side of the city of Chicago. And I'm talking specifically about my odd world of strange and miscellaneous and otherwise uncategorizable media for your turntable, for my turntable, for everybody's turntable. Although, judging by the content of what is talked about in this podcast, I would be shocked if it was anybody's but my own turntable. But whatever the case, my friends, we are going to take a dive into a record called A Lesson in Love by Dr. Murray Banks. I figured that would be a good record to talk about right now, given that this episode is being released on February 15th, 2026 specifically, assuming nothing stupid happens between the time I record and the time it's actually released. And February 15th is known as Gloat Day, as coined by Snoopy. Yes, Snoopy from Peanuts. He called February 15th Gloat Day because, well, that was the day that you could gloat about all the Valentines that you got from all of your admirers, I suppose. So happy Gloat Day. We're going to study A Lesson in Love by Dr. Murray Banks. But before we do that, I just wanted to touch on a little bit of feedback I got about the previous episode, number 27, covering A Bright New World by the Sanborn Singers. The Sanborn Singers, by the way, in case you missed that episode, were a singing group formed by Amway distributors. And A Bright New World was an album put out in 1971 to commemorate the 1971 World of Amway convention. Well, one listener commented that the way that the Sanborn Singers are arranged on the cover, it looks suspiciously like a pyramid. And I really don't know what to say. I mean, you have to use a little bit of creativity to kind of notice that, but it is what it is. I can totally see why somebody says that they're arranged in a pyramid. And of course, it is a little bit, considering it's Amway. But on the other hand, the FTC, I think it was the FTC, determined that Amway is not a pyramid scheme. But at the same time, you gotta kind of wonder if there's some kind of subconscious projection going on. I don't know. But another person tipped me off to the existence of similar records from Tupperware, of all people. And I think the record that she specifically mentioned had, among other famous people, Anita Bryant. But I think I need to seek that stuff out. Good grief. Oh, by the way, I mentioned in a previous episode that there's a Facebook group that I follow in which basically everybody kind of shows off what they're listening to, what vinyl they're listening to. And there was a discussion in a thread on there. People were asking, how do you digitize your vinyl? And somebody chimed in and said, if you're digitizing your vinyl, you're wasting your time because you can go on Spotify and find what you're looking for. And I think this person mentioned there's a download option too, which I did not know about. But I posted a picture of A Bright New World, the Amway album. And I said, okay, hotshot, find me where this is on Spotify. So this person responded to my comment and said, well, if you're only checking Spotify, you're really missing out because there are other sources where you can find digital copies already. And what did he post? He posted the YouTube link of A Bright New World that I myself uploaded. So my response was, guess who actually digitized and uploaded that to YouTube? I mean, that is a good point. You don't want to waste your time digitizing something if there's already a digital version available, assuming it's the exact same recording, of course. I mentioned in a previous episode, Pac-Man Fever, the Buckner and Garcia album. The version that is available digitally is not the same that was released on vinyl and cassette in the early 80s. Because of legalities and things, they actually had to re-record it for CD and later issues. But anyway, let's not get carried away with that. One final comment I'm going to address about the previous episode. I heard from one person that the Amway song, The Uncommon Man, kind of sounded like I'm Forgetting You. I think that's the name of the song. The song that is at the end of the... was from 1966, I think, from the movie Manos, The Hands of Fate. And my response to that was, if that thought didn't cross my mind when I first heard it, I would be lying. It is kind of weird. It has kind of that same vibe, especially the instrumental part, really, the backing track.
He is known as a friend who shares. He shows by his deeds that he cares.
Forgetting you is the thing that I cannot do.
But I don't want to dwell too much on a past episode. I want to dwell on a present episode. So let's all study a lesson in love. First, I'd like to start off with a bit about Murray Banks, and unfortunately, a bit is all I can tell you because, well, there's not much out there about him. What I can tell you is this much. He was born July 17th, 1917 in the Bronx. He had at least one child, a son, at some point in his life. That's all I know about that much. He graduated from NYU and Columbia University, and he did his clinical psychopathology study at Bellevue Hospital. At various points in his life, he was a psychology professor at Long Island University, Pace College, now Pace University, University of Memphis, and Northern Michigan University. And while he was at Pace, by the way, he headed the psychology department for a number of years. He was an adjunct professor of psychology at Northwood Institute, now Northwood University in Midland, Michigan, and he was a visiting professor at Fairleigh Dickinson University in New Jersey, and probably in many other places as well. He really got around. He authored several books, including, but not necessarily limited to, How to Live with Yourself or What to Do Until the Psychiatrist Comes, Just in Case You Think You're Normal, and How to Overcome an Inferiority Complex. As for Dr. Banks himself, he was apparently wealthy. From what one person said, he was kind of stingy. He didn't like to throw his money around all the time, although he did kind of flaunt it. But this person's reasoning was, I guess you don't get rich by spending your money and being generous with it. Others say he was a very kind and generous person. He reputedly had a not quite properly fitting toupee. Unfortunately, you can't really tell on his material. There's only one picture of him that I think is used on all of his album covers, and it doesn't really look that bad if he is wearing a toupee at all. A couple of fun facts I was able to find out about Dr. Murray Banks. For one thing, he rescued Jane Mansfield's 6-year-old son, Zoltan, from a supposedly tamed lion at Jungle Land USA in Thousand Oaks, California. Jungle Land USA was kind of a zoo/amusement park that people could visit that specialized in animals that were being trained to be used on movie sets. So it was kind of assumed the lion was tamed. Obviously, the lion was not fully tamed, and he mauled Zoltan on November 26, 1966, given a 50-50 prognosis, and he is still alive to this day at age 65, so obviously things turned out better than they could have turned out for him, I guess. Also, Dr. Banks was friends with Christine Jorgensen, who was the first publicly known American transgender, which might explain this little bit from A Lesson in Love.
Why is it that men seem to be the aggressor and women are always seem to be running away and saving their chastity? Why don't men save their chastity? Well, first of all, it's a social thing. And secondly, why is it a social thing? It's no accident. A woman becomes pregnant. That's the answer. A man doesn't become pregnant. Not yet. I'm working on it.
Murray Banks lived to be 91 years old, dying on August 26, 2008 in Rockaway Park, Queens. Now, as for the album, A Lesson in Love, it was first released in 1961 on the Murmill, that is M-U-R-M-I-L, Associates label. By the way, if you're looking this up, this is not the same Murmill Associates that did jazz, R&B, and other genres in the 70s. I wasn't really able to find out any information about Murmill Associates, but I'm guessing it was a private label and that the M-U-R part of Murmill refers to Murray Banks. No idea who the M-I-L would be, but leading credence to my theory that this was a small indie label is that my copy of the record, a 1968 reissue, was pressed by Capitol Records' then brand new Winchester, Virginia plant. I can tell because in the runout groove at the end of each side of the vinyl, there's an etching of a sideways triangle and a dash. That's a giveaway that it was pressed by Capitol's Winchester plant. And it makes sense because Dr. Banks was based in New York, which would normally use Capitol's Scranton, Pennsylvania plant, but the Scranton plant was actually redirecting their work to the Winchester plant, and Scranton eventually folded, leaving just Winchester as the East Coast plant. But anyway, back to our featured record. In addition to its original release in 1961 and the 1968 reissue that I have, the album was also reissued in 1964, and it was also available in Australia on the His Master's Voice label. Murray Banks released several other albums on the Murmill Associates label, including How to Live with Yourself or What to Do Until the Psychiatrist Comes, Just in Case You Think You're Normal, Dr. Murray Banks Tells Jewish Stories, Dr. Murray Banks Speaks on the Drama of Sex, Anyone Who Goes to a Psychiatrist Should Have His Head Examined, and How to Quit Smoking in 6 Days or Drop Dead in 7, among other titles. He did have at least one record on a different label, What We Can Learn from the Kinsey Report. But anyway, the address for Murmill Associates that was listed on the record labels was 8 East 63rd Street, New York 21, New York. A couple of interesting things about that address, by the way. I would have thought that the zip code would have been 10021, given the New York 21, and usually those 2-digit little codes would become the last 2 digits of zip codes when zip codes were standardized, but the zip currently is actually 10065. And that building at 8 East 63rd Street is actually residential, so I'm wondering if maybe that was actually Murray Banks's home address, and he just put that on the label for contact reasons. Now, I like to describe the record, the physical record that is, because, hey, it's an audio podcast, right? Except you're watching on YouTube. The front cover has 3 colors on it, white, red, and black. There's a giant drawn white heart in the middle of it, and in that heart, there's the title in a very artsy-fartsy font, I guess, in all capital letters, A Lesson in Love, with the letters going back and forth between black and red. And the O in the word love is a red heart with an arrow through it. On the upper right portion of the heart, there are all kinds of little cartoony drawings, like a woman on a pedestal with a man on his knees presenting a heart to her. There's a drawing of a man with a little bouquet of flowers. There's a drawing of what I'm assuming is supposed to be Adam and Eve because they're 2 naked people and the woman is holding some kind of a fruit. There's a drawing of a bird holding a flower. I think it's a rose. There is a drawing of what looks like a evil Cupid. And there's a little drawing of a kind of sheepish looking man holding a little sign or piece of paper or something that says "Ode to You." I guess it's supposed to be a Valentine's Day card or something. And there are little red hearts kind of in random places on that part of the giant white heart. There's a little flower drawing, looks like a daisy or something. And there's a big main drawing in black, taking up, I'd say, about the top 3/5 of the front album cover. It is of what I am assuming is supposed to be a psychologist or psychiatrist in front of one of those couches that psychiatrists are known to have, with a very attractive woman in a strapless dress lying down on it. I wonder if the psychiatrist is supposed to be a caricature of Dr. Murray Banks. I'm not really sure, but he's got a big bald spot. He has kind of an evil grin on his face. He's writing something down on a clipboard. Next to him, there is a little bottle that says Dr. Banks Potion. There is a rose on the floor, and then behind Dr. Banks on the floor is a high-heeled shoe. The white heart in the drawing and everything has a red background behind it, and on the top right corner is the catalog of the album, MB106, and I'm guessing the MB stands for Murray Banks. And at the very bottom, in big capital letters, it says Dr. Murray Banks. On the back side of the record, there is, it's all black and white, just like you would pretty much expect. On the left side, there's a picture of Dr. Banks wearing a suit with some kind of weird tie. And it looks almost like kind of a half bolo tie, half bow tie. I don't know what you would call those. And there's a little biography of Dr. Banks there, part of which was used for the little bits about his life that I talked about a moment ago. On the top, it says, Dr. Murray Banks, popular psychologist and public speaker, presents his wise and witty comments on love and marriage, ... to help you fall in or out of love. Honestly, listening to the record and jumping a little bit ahead, I don't really hear him telling you how to fall out of love, really. But it says, a lesson in love, the psychology of falling in and out of love, how to tell the difference between love and infatuation. What is love? Is there such a thing as love at first sight? How does love at first sight develop? Conditions for developing love, how to weave an enchantment over others, how to get the one you want to be in love with you, the differences between love and sex, why we desire to be loved, how to mend a broken heart. I really don't think that's actually covered on this. Understand this thing called love. All delivered in the exciting and humorous style of the dynamic ... Dr. Murray Banks. This record was recorded live before an actual audience. Yes, it was. And I believe the person who introduces him is the same person who takes questions from the audience later on in the record, and his name is Dr. Mo Gilson. I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. But underneath all that text that I just read you, there is a list of records by Dr. Murray Banks, the ones that I just basically read off to you. And all the way at the bottom, it says, available by mail by sending remittance with order to Mermill Associates, 8 East 63rd Street, New York, New York, 10021. Oh, 10021. Look at that. So my copy actually does have a full zip code that ends 10021. They must have changed it since. And here's how I know mine is from at least 1968, copyright 1968, all rights reserved. The contents of this record are fully copyrighted, and it is illegal to use for public performance or broadcast without permission. Ooh. And if I look at the spine, once again, there's nothing printed on the spine. So if you're storing this in a shelf, you'll have no idea what record it is. Oh boy, but taking a look at the actual record, nothing to write home about. It's a standard 12-inch vinyl record. Again, my copy is pressed in Winchester, Virginia, at the Capitol Records pressing plant. The label on my copy is very bland. It's just kind of a reddish, orangish cover. Think about the Capitol Records labels from the mid-70s. It looks kind of like that, but it's just all plain orange-red. The font is very bland. It's not centered properly. Mermill Associates on top. It's only got one band per side. Really nothing worth writing home about. I believe other pressings of this record, the earlier ones, have an even blander label. It's kind of a tannish, goldish background instead of this. Maybe it's not quite as bland, but still nothing to write home about. But what about the record when you actually listen to it? Well, it is not quite an hour long. It's, I think, 24 minutes one side, 28 minutes on the other side. And it's just Dr. Murray Banks giving a spiel about what love is in front of an audience. And he injects a lot of humor in it. And let me see, I made a note of stories that he told. Throughout the course of the album, he tells 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 stories of varying lengths. The first one is a poem about a flapper girl. In fact, that's what starts off the album. He has a couple of amusing stories about a ship captain getting his way, a Chinese woman fanning her lover's grave, and there are a lot of things like that. My personal favorite is this story right here.
There's a waitress in one of the country resorts, very sloppy waitress. She's always breaking dishes. The maitre d' told her if she breaks any more dishes, she's going to be discharged. She happened to walk along with one of these sugar bowls with a lump sugar in it. She dropped the whole bowl. So she quickly pushed the glass under the tables, picked up all the sugar, and threw it into her bosom. She walked by one of the tables. One of the men said, "Waitress, can I have some sugar, please, for my coffee?" She said, "1 lump or 2?" He says, "2 lumps, please." She says, "Here you are." She says, "Would you like some cream, too?" He says, "You wouldn't dare."
But that's not all the album is. He just kind of sprinkles those stories in as he sees fit. But his main purpose was to talk about love. He says there's no single person for anyone, that love can be anywhere and it's accidental and geographical.
Love may be yours anywhere, and the person that you happen to be in love with is a pure accident. If you come from New York, you'll probably love a New Yorker. From California, a Californian. From Michigan, a Michiganer. It's only a question of geography, isn't it? As to where you happen to live and whom you happen to meet or love.
He talks about how love is frequently confused with money, a person's looks, vanity, and jealousy. And jealousy is only a sign of personal insecurity or threat to your ego, because true love is never jealous. Love is also confused with self-love. Let's hear what he says about orange squeezing love right here.
You know what orange squeezing kind of love is? A man says, for example, "I love oranges." But if the orange could talk back, it wouldn't agree with him, because it sees itself squeezed out of all its juice, thrown in the garbage can. Does the man love oranges? What he means is, I love what oranges do for me. They're not oranges. So when a man says, "I love you," does he love you or what you do for him?
As hyped on the back of the album cover, Dr. Banks talks about love versus infatuation. He says there's a physical element, which is very important in infatuation, but much less important in love. It is a link in a chain, but it's not the whole thing. He says love takes time. It must be built gradually through experiences, conversations, interests, and having certain things in common. Love is a creation, as is a painting. You just can't throw paints on a canvas and get a gorgeous painting. Infatuation is impatient. It can't wait. It wants what it wants when it wants it. Love, however, is patient and knows that it has years in front of it to build it up. The difference between love and infatuation also involves the number and types of traits on which the feeling is based. And that's all fine and dandy, but what is real love? Well, real love has to go through phases. The only real phase I remember him mentioning was friendship. He says love cannot happen without friendship. When you first meet someone, love cannot happen right away. At that point, the other person is a candidate for love. Love is more than sex appeal, involving strong roots from many mutual interests. There have to be complementing personalities. He addresses that concept of opposites attract. Well, the more opposite you are, he says, the less likely it is you'll be truly in love. Dr. Banks talks about some commonalities that would contribute to true love. That includes age, education, religion, intelligence, and background. He says you don't have to have all those things in common, but the fewer of those things you have in common, the much less likely it is that a love relationship will actually be successful, quite simply because, well, a 20-year-old has different viewpoints and different goals from what a 40-year-old would. Same with religion. It's very possible for a Catholic and a Jew to marry, but they both have completely different viewpoints. So that kind of might interfere with having a successful relationship, even though it's not guaranteed that it will interfere. Dr. Banks argues that there's no such thing as love at first sight, and there's also no such thing as falling in love, because, as he says, you march into it. Love is created, but not in one moment, just as a seed cannot grow into a flower overnight. Can infatuation grow into love? Of course it can, he says. But Dr. Banks asserts that it is possible to get someone you want to be in love with you, but he doesn't really go into much explanation. He might have gone into explanation at that particular presentation, but it was edited out if he did. Dr. Banks offers a definition of true love that he said he gave in response to a woman in the audience when he made an appearance on Jack Parr's TV show. He said to listen to the definition very carefully because every single word is significant.
Love, ladies and gentlemen, is an attitude between two people who have many things in common, tastes, interests, points of view, and that they share these things in common, in companionship, to the degree that they are stronger together than either one is alone.
Dr. Banks talks about sex versus love.
Sex is a passionate interest in another body. Love is a passionate interest in another personality and what they are. Sex craves fulfillment, satisfaction. Love craves only fulfillment. You can force a person to sex. You can never force him to love. You can buy sex. You can never buy love.
And he says that sex expression is always the most satisfying when it comes as an expression of true love rather than for personal gratification. Going back to the concept of love, Banks says that we desire love because we think it'll rescue us from failure, frustration, and disappointment. Love gives us a feeling of comfort and security. The search for love is an attempt to escape from inadequacy. Before the Q&A, Dr. Banks offers this final thought.
Everyone who wants love at any age may have it. Anyone. You just simply have to know how to create it. But the power to create it is in your power. It is not a magical gift that some have and some do not. You don't have to be a gorgeous girl. You don't have to be a ravingly handsome man, because all sorts of the plainest people have enduring love. All sorts of people whose looks have long since faded have deep enduring loves.
After that, there are a few minutes of Q&A assisted, as I said before, by Dr. Mo Gilson. And it's a good thing he's there because it is extremely difficult to hear the questions from the audience as they're asked, because the audience isn't microphoned, and it sounds like they didn't even have a microphone to go out into the audience with. But Dr. Gilson repeats the questions on microphone so that everybody can hear them, including you, the listener. And when I digitized this record, I tried my best to use filtering and enhancements and even some AI to try to boost the actual audience questions, but unfortunately, even that didn't really help. So what you're going to hear if you go to YouTube and listen to my digitization of this record, that's exactly how it plays back. Now, having said this, one person who described Dr. Banks on the web talked about a time when he went to a presentation that Dr. Banks was giving, and he said, hey, when it comes to the Q&A, I want you to ask this question. And it turned out that the reason he wanted to ask the question was it was a setup for a joke. And there's a good reason to believe that at least one person in this audience was such a plant to set up a joke. And you will hear that joke right now.
A married couple had a dog that they loved dearly. And you know, whenever they'd go out, they'd take the dog along. They bought tickets one day when Auntie Mame was playing on Broadway. They bought 3 tickets. One for the husband, one for the wife, and one for the dog. They went to the theater, and the husband sat on one side, the wife on the other, and the dog in the middle. And the dog sat up, and he watched the whole show, and he applauded at all the right points. The man sitting behind the dog was going out of his head. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore. He tapped the man on the shoulder. He says, "Mister, I must tell you This is the most remarkable dog I've ever seen. Not only does he applaud at all the right points, but he actually enjoys the show. How do you explain it? I don't know, he hated the book.
So when you listen to A Lesson in Love, that's what you're going to hear. Now, before we get to my ratings, I'm going to share some of my record collecting thoughts. For this installment of Sean's record collecting thoughts, my thoughts are going to be about a record show that I recently attended. I talked about it in previous episodes about how it had been over 20 years, well over 20 years actually, since the last time that I went to a record show. I think it was, I know it was the record show that Record Setter in East Brunswick, New Jersey, that store, God rest its soul, they used to hold in Edison, New Jersey at a big convention center there. Previously, I went to a record show or two not too far, maybe even in Joliet, Illinois, back in the 90s, in like a Holiday Inn on a frontage road off an interstate or something. But this time I went to the Chicagoland Record and CD Collectors Show on January 18th, and it took place at the Countryside Banquet and Conference Center in Countryside, Illinois, right off of Interstate 55, probably about 15 miles away from Chicago. I did not see any country whatsoever in Countryside. It was mostly suburban sprawl. But the room where the record show was in, I don't know if I want to call it a room because it was pretty huge. And there was a stage. It was basically a banquet room, a ballroom, and it was wide. It was huge, and it was quite crowded. There were a lot of people. I'd say mostly around my age, like Gen Xers. There were some younger, some older. What really surprised me was I saw a pretty significant number of teenagers, like 16, 17, especially girls. So that was interesting because usually at least what I remember from going in the 90s to these things was it was mainly middle-aged men, even when I was only like 22 years old. On the stage, there was somebody named DJ Ruta, R-U-T-A, and I guess that she's from a radio station called WZAV, which I believe is the campus radio station at St. Xavier University. But she was playing a really, really wide variety of songs, mainly off of vinyl, off of records. It was a really wide variety, some new stuff, some old stuff, wide range of genres, and periodically between songs, she would make announcements about somebody looking for a particular record, kind of like what Record Setter used to do at their conventions. I thought that was cool, and I was considering actually taking advantage of that service, as it were, but I don't know why. It might have been my social anxiety kicking in, but yeah, I did not take advantage of that. But there are a lot of vendors, and the problem with this and other record shows I've been to is the vendors just have their stuff out on the tables. You have no idea if they're representing a store. You don't know their names. You don't know nothing about them unless you actually talk to them beyond, hey, I like to buy these albums here. But there were so many. There were vendor tables all around the outer perimeter, and then there were rows within the outer perimeter. So my strategy was I walked in, paid the $5 admission fee, and then basically rotated clockwise around the outer vendors and then tried to work my way back and forth among the rows that were in between. I arrived, I think, at about 1 p.m. The show was scheduled for 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. with the 7 a.m. early bird. Yeah, I was not going to get up that friggin' early on a Sunday. And my thoughts on the show were, I don't know, it wasn't quite what I remembered from previous record shows. It wasn't quite what I expected because it was really nothing off the beaten path. At previous record shows, I'd find a lot of things that I never even thought to look for. For example, at one record show, I walked away with a handful of various strange cast recordings of the Broadway show Hair, like the French cast recording, the Japanese cast recording, the recording that the Broadway cast did at St. John the Divine in 1971. I wasn't even looking for those specifically, but I'm a big Hair fan, so when I was flipping through the records and I saw those, holy cow, I pounced on them right away. But I didn't really see much like that. It was pretty much just mainstream stuff like rock, country, metal, some hip-hop, R&B, soul, that kind of thing. Of course, I went with partly the intention of picking up some material for this podcast and didn't really have a lot of luck. But there was one record that I did see that I was very curious about, but it had an $80 price tag on it. Those of you who follow me on social media, you know what record I'm referring to, but it's an album on the Beacon record label, and I actually have one of their albums, but not this particular one. It's from, I think, 1958. On the cover is an attractive woman, topless, and holding a cat. And the name of the album was my, let's just say slang term for cat, belongs to Daddy. It was disturbed. It was a very disturbing title. And from what I understand, it is an album full of really, really raunchy song titles that are just double entendres and puns. Nothing really specifically adult related in content. It's more like, at first glance, it's all adult related, but not really. It's just the clever, or maybe not so clever punnery. So I posted a picture of that on my social media accounts, and I was surprised at the responses I got. People told me that I was a fool for passing it up for an $80 price tag. Somebody said, yeah, you're lucky if you can get one of those for under $200. Someone else said, I just sold my copy for $250. This is a bargain. Keep in mind that the most I ever spent on a single record was $60. And I didn't really want to break that record, pun not intended. So I wasn't going to pick that up and then come home and say, hey, honey, look what I got. Maybe if I see it again, maybe I'll grab it. I don't know. It could go hand in hand with the other Beacon Records title that I do have in my collection that I probably will get to at some point. And the thing about going to this record show, and I think it's because of how huge it was that I was actually getting burnt out after maybe a little over an hour, because I would flip through the records. Most of the dealers had their records sorted mostly by genre and then alphabetical by the name of the artist. So I'd go straight to whatever letters I was looking for and grab something if I liked what I saw or moved on or whatever. Then there was another vendor. Repeat the process and repeat and repeat and repeat. And I was shocked at how mind-numbing it got. Was there something wrong with me? I mean, I'm someone who loves record shopping, and I love especially when I find something unusual, but I was seriously getting tired of it. And on top of that, there are a lot of vendors who started packing up early and leaving. I was like, are you kidding me? This thing's supposed to go to 4. Mind you, there was a big Bears game on later that day. People probably wanted to get home and watch it, but I was surprised at all the vendors who packed up and left early before I could even get to them. But at the same time, I wasn't disappointed because I was really starting to feel numb. Now, what did I pick up, though? I did pick up some albums. I didn't really look through any singles or anything, but I did flip through the albums and I picked a few up. The first one I grabbed, this was in a $5 and less bin, a copy of James Taylor's debut album. I wasn't specifically looking for it. It was more like, if I ever see one of these at a reasonable price, I'll pick it up. So yeah, this was $5. His debut album on Apple Records. And the cover isn't in great shape, but the vinyl looked like it was never touched. So I figured, yeah, I should probably grab this one. And next, I saw a copy of Equinox by Sergio Mendes in Brazil 66. Now, my wife and I have a guilty pleasure, and that guilty pleasure is called tacky music. I think I talked about that before. Tacky music is kind of the things that the younger adults of the 60s were into, like Herb Alpert, Sergio Mendes, and space age bachelor pad music, like, say, Esquivel and Martin Denny. Basically things that if you listen to, just the musical part of it, it's such a hoot. It's so silly. even though it wasn't really meant to be. And we don't have really much Sergio Mendes in our collection, so I had to grab that. It was cheap enough. It was like $7, I think. Speaking of tacky music, I saw a vendor who had a lot of Martin Denny albums, and well, we don't have any Martin Denny in our collection. And I decided not to go hog wild. I just buy one and see what I think about it. And that one was Martin Denny with an exclamation point at the end of it. And that's an album from 1966. The price tag on it was $4. It's a mono copy. So I bought it. And I realized when I got home that it's also a promo version of the album. So I thought, cool. Talked about promo records previously in this podcast, but hey, cool to have another one, and got a feeling it's probably going to sound really good as well. The next record I bought, another vendor, I was specifically looking for a copy of Disraeli Gears by Cream on vinyl. I'm not really a huge Cream fan, but I love Disraeli Gears. So I found one, and the vendor I bought it from said, "Oh, is this copy one of those black light copies?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, the original pressing, if you hold a black light to it, it looks really, really cool." And he looked at it. I showed him the label. He said, "Oh, okay, that's a repressing. That's a second pressing. It's not an original." And yeah, according to Discogs, my copy is from 1969, which would have made it, I think, a third pressing. I don't have a black light, so I can't confirm that this does or does not have the black light color on it. And this vendor noticed the Sergio Mendes record that I bought. And he told me that Lonnie Hall, the lead singer in Brazil 66, he went to grade school with her. And that was when I learned that apparently Brazil 66 isn't really from Brazil, just Sergio Mendes. And later on, when I did some looky-looing, I found that Sergio Mendes discovered Lonnie Hall when she was performing at a club in Old Town in Chicago. And from what the vendor told me, I forgot what grade school it was. Oh, shoot, I wish I could remember. But yeah, he showed me yearbook pictures of her, and he had another picture of her on his phone that he showed me. So I guess he keeps that stuff handy for when people buy Brazil 66 records, and he has a little conversation piece. But yeah, that was interesting. So that was a stereo pressing that was made in Terre Haute, as was the Disraeli Gears that I bought. By the way, the James Taylor record that I got was a Jacksonville pressing, Jacksonville, Illinois, pressed by Capitol Records with the Apple label on it. There was another album from my wish list, more like my want list. Maybe it could be a wish list, but I have the most recent reissues of both Electric Ladyland and Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix Experience on the Sony Legacy label, and they sound absolutely fantastic. So I decided I needed to get that same version of Axis Bold as Love, which I always saw at my two favorite record stores here in Chicago, not far from where I live. But they didn't have it the last several times I went through. The one time I actually wanted to go buy it, they didn't have it. I went back again. Neither of them had it. I'm like, come on, people. But you know what? A vendor at the Chicagoland Record and CD Collectors Show had it. So grabbed it. I said, I want to buy this from you. And the vendor said, okay, I just want to give you a little warning. And I'm like, warning? He said, yeah, please be aware. This is not a first pressing. This is a reissue. And I told him, sir, I am totally aware. I specifically want this pressing. He said, well, I got to tell you, it's going to sound really good. I said, I kind of figured. He told me that pressing and the current pressings of Jimi Hendrix Experience albums are all from the same pressing plant that Acoustic Sounds uses, which might explain a lot as to why they sound so good. I don't know if you have any of the pressings from Acoustic Sounds, because I don't know my listeners all that well. But they do reissues that sound absolutely phenomenal. They're a little bit pricey, but they're worth it. They're absolutely worth it. Toward the end of my stay at the record show, I found a $5 copy of Blood, Sweat, and Tears 3, their third album, duh. And the reason I was interested in that was because I had a copy in my records somewhere, but it vanished over the years. Not long ago, I wanted to play it, and I looked for it. I'm like, wait, where the hell's my copy of Blood, Sweat, Tears 3? I couldn't find it. I checked discogs.com because at that time, every piece of vinyl that was in this house was logged in discogs.com. So I checked my collection in Discogs. Sure enough, it's not there. I didn't misplace it. It just wasn't there. It vanished. So I figured, hey, for $5, it's worth it. The vinyl is in pretty good shape. It's 1970 Terre Haute press. A lot of the records I bought from the show were Terre Haute pressings. Good grief. But yeah, and so I'm happy to have that. Probably give that a spin later from the day that I'm recording this, actually. And shortly after I bought that, I left, ran some errands, and went home. But there is another record that I bought that I am planning to discuss on this podcast. It is an album on the Decca Records label, a reissue from 1962. It is called Mommy, Where Do Babies Come From? Bought it for $3. And yeah, my wife looked at me and just kind of shook her head and walked away when I showed her that. So I will say this, though. I saw many, many, many copies of Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. Remember, I mentioned that in the previous episode that I saw a very used copy of Off the Wall at one of the record stores I frequent, but the price tag was unusually high. I saw the same thing at the Chicagoland Record and CD Collectors Show. Every copy of Off the Wall I saw, no matter which version of it, no matter how good a condition it was, no matter how bad a condition it was unusually high, like $30. So I don't know, is there something going on with Off the Wall that the prices are all of a sudden very high, even for just regular stock pressings, not like the ultra high quality remasters or anything? Thought that was weird. Having said that, that was my experience at the Chicagoland Record and CD Collectors Show. And would I go back? If I do, it's not going to be anytime soon. Again, I was surprised at how overwhelmed I was, and that overwhelming actually caused my mind to go a little bit numb, and I needed to get away. I don't want to say I'm never going to go again knowing that. It's more like I need some time away. But also, I think a little bit of it is the law of diminishing returns, because the more stuff that I get, the less that I need, the less that I'm looking for. There were some records that I was looking for that I still could not find. For example, a non-reissue version of How to Speak Hip by Del Close and John Brent. I cannot find that. I found some reissued versions from, say, years that begin with the number 2, but I'm not looking for that. I have one, and yeah, even though it's pretty faithful-ish to the original, it's still not quite what it should be. And also, for the life of me, I cannot find a copy of That's the Way God Planned It by Billy Preston. I have the single, but I don't have the album of the same name. I don't know why I can't find that. And also something else that really stuck out to me. There was a lot of Beatles, as you could expect, but it was about 90% American albums, like Meet the Beatles' second album, Something New. I don't think I saw any actual Parlophone albums, or at least nothing that wasn't, say, a modern day reissue from digital sources. I'd say about 90% of Beatles stuff that I saw was vintage American pressings. I'd say about 8% modern reissues, and 2% Japanese pressings. So that's really all that I saw in terms of Beatles. I was really hoping to get some more Parlophone albums because there are a lot of gaps in my collection. So I was looking for some Parlophones, even from the 80s, as long as they were mastered by Harry Moss. Harry Moss did a great job mastering Beatles albums. Didn't see any of those, did not see either of those Beatles boxes that I really want to get my hands on, be it the Beatles collection or, oh, what the heck is that other one called? I've seen it called the Beatles box, but I think the full title is something like From Liverpool, Here's the Beatles or something. That has 8 records. It's an 8-record best of compilation. It has a lot of unique mixes you cannot get anywhere else. And from what I understand, the sound quality on it is absolutely phenomenal. But alas, could not find it. Did see a couple of Butcher covers. And of course, I walked away with none of them. But that was that. Having said that, that was my experience at the Chicagoland Record and CD Collectors Show. Might go again in the future. Probably not the next one. They happen every 2 months or so. Might keep my eyes out for other record shows, especially smaller ones, because I kind of like those. Now, one thing that did concern me, I mentioned in episode 27 that I saw that prices on even used records at one of my favorite record stores here in the city skyrocketed, surprisingly high. And I was concerned that it was basically a reflection on, say, how tariffs were affecting stores and independent vendors. And I was worried that I would see the same thing happening at the record show. Honestly, I didn't really see that. I found all the prices to be pretty much where they were the last time I was at a record show back in the 90s and early 2000s. So nothing really high, lots of stuff for single-digit prices. Even the new stuff wasn't terribly expensive. The only thing that was ever really truly expensive was the occasional serious collectible. So I was happy to see that. So with all that said, that could be a reason for me to go back to that record show at some point. Probably not the next one. They happen every 2 months. Maybe I will explore the possibility of going to other record shows. But then again, when I went to my favorite search engine and searched Chicago area record shows, that was the only one that showed up. And I don't want to drive for hours and hours and hours, but hey, you do what you do, right? And I encourage you to do that. Go to your favorite internet search engine and look and see if there are any record shows in your area and check them out. You might find some pretty interesting stuff, meet some interesting people, and maybe come home with a nice haul. In case you're new to this podcast, just as Dick Clark used to do in American Bandstand, I like to rate the records that I talk about in this podcast, and I rate them on a scale of 1 through 5 inclusive, each in 5 categories. One of them is local interest or usefulness. Sometimes I kind of split the difference and do an average of the two, but not all the time. The next category I rate on is historical interest. Is the record of perhaps interesting in a historical kind of way, maybe a sign of its time? I also rate records on their uniqueness, weirdness, and enjoyability. Let's start with local interest and usefulness. Murray Banks is very New York, and he has a very noticeable New York accent. He's associated with New York. He was born in the Bronx, died in Queens. On the other hand, he's pretty well known outside of New York, and you don't really need to be a New Yorker to understand the record, to understand his wit. So let's just go with usefulness. Now, in terms of usefulness, this album works on 2 levels. For sophisticated adult humor of its day and even today, the record works very well. If you really genuinely want some good advice about love from an actual psychologist, well, the record's also quite useful. And as someone who has been happily married for 26 years, the things that Dr. Banks says about love and what constitutes true love and what works in love, I think they hit the nail right on the head. So I'm going to go all the way to a 5 on the usefulness rating of A Lesson in Love. What do I think about the historical interest of the record? Well, it's definitely a good time capsule of the vibe of the early 60s, especially when you compare to, say, 2026. I'm not going to go all the way with a 5 because the main reason I would say that you'd want to listen to this record even today isn't necessarily just to peek at history, so I'll give it a 4 for historical interest. Uniqueness. Well, these kinds of humor records were not unique for their time. There are a lot of them, and in general, it's pretty easy to find records by Dr. Murray Banks. They're out there if you want them for very reasonable prices. Really, I don't think there's anything unique about it. Well, okay, maybe the label. It's an independent record label, and I am pretty sure that Dr. Banks was behind the label itself and that he outsourced the record to at least Capitol Records for pressing. Yeah, that's a little bit on the unique side. So, you know what? I'll go ahead and give the uniqueness rating a 2. How about weirdness? I mean, after all, the name of this podcast is My Weird Record Collection. Well, after listening to the record and learning a bit about Murray Banks, my concept of a lesson in love as a weird record has changed a little bit. Of course, I first found the record in the same section where I would and did find other weird records over at Beverly Records in Chicago, where I paid $5 for the record on January 6, 2024, by the way. But really, I think given the times, given the concept, and given the person behind it, it's not really all that weird, except maybe the thought of getting a record to learn about love. That could be a weird thing, but on the other hand, though, if you knew anything about Dr. Banks, you were also probably buying the record because you knew that you were in for some entertainment, for some laughs. Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to give the weirdness rating a 1. Now, the most important thing that I think there is about listening to records is enjoyability. How about with a lesson in love? Honestly, there's nothing not to like about it. It's enjoyable now in 2026, and it probably was just enjoyable in 1961, maybe even more so given the times.
People ask me very often if I'm married. Well, my students ask me the same question. I say, one girl one day, well, what do you think? She says, you're married. She says, you look tired. Another one said, no, you're single. She says, you run around too much. Another one stood up one day, she says, well, I happen to know. I said, well, tell the class. She says, you've been married, but are separated. So I can easily see how someone would marry you, but how they could live with you, I'll never know.
The humor is witty, the information is good. The only thing that's not really enjoyable about the record is the sound quality. It's not well engineered, really. The sound is a little bit distant. It's a little bit muffled. You can make out everything he says and everything. It's listenable. It's very listenable, but it might put some people off. But having said that, I could give the record a 5 for enjoyability because it is thoroughly enjoyable, or I could dock it a point because it really could have sounded better, but I'll split the difference and go 4.5. So for the final score, again, 5 for usefulness, 4 for historical interest, 2 for uniqueness, 1 for weirdness, 4.5 for enjoyability. That all adds up to 16.5, which in the overall rank of the records talked about in this podcast since episode 1, puts A Lesson in Love 1 spot below Will They Know It's Summertime and 1 spot above Chevrolet Salutes the 100th anniversary of college football. So, my friends, that was what I could tell you about Dr. Murray Banks, A Lesson in Love. Do you have any thoughts on this record or perhaps anything else that might be relevant to this podcast? Well, I'm about to tell you where you can send those thoughts, give credit where credit is due, and then, of course, tell you about the next episode. You can send your thoughts over email to myweirdrecords@fab4it.com. Fab4it is spelled F-A-B, the number 4-I-T. By the way, the website for this podcast is very similar. It is myweirdrecords.fab4it.com. And if you go there, you can see show notes for each episode. You can download previous episodes of the podcast or listen to them right there on the site without even downloading them. There are resources where you can find links to where you can get accessories such as turntables, styluses, outer sleeves, stuff like that. Anything you might need, I hopefully have a link to it up there. There's a link to mental health resources because I'm a big believer in mental health. There's a link to a list of all the records that have so far been covered in this podcast, so you can find the episodes pretty easily. And there's also a link in which you can support this podcast financially. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. That's kind of a misnomer because if you use that option to donate, I'm not going to buy coffee with it. I do not like coffee. I like, say, keeping this podcast alive. So I will use it and put it toward, say, domain renewals and website upkeep and all that good stuff, and perhaps even getting more material for this podcast. I'm also reachable on various social networks. Most of the social networks, my handle is simply My Weird Records. I'm most active on Threads, but I'm also theoretically on Instagram and, what else is it? Blue Sky and Facebook, of course. And on Facebook, you can look for My Weird Record Collection in the Facebook search engine, or you can go straight to facebook.com/myweirdrecords. The podcast is also on YouTube. I'm going to give you a warning. Even though I post episodes on YouTube, they're not always on time. And in fact, the last 3 were not on time. But I do my best. But you can get the podcast and also extra videos related to this podcast. And some of them might not even talk about my weird records, but my normal ones too. And also on YouTube, on my channel, you can actually listen to most, if not all, of the records that I discuss from start to finish. I make playlists out of them. Many of them I digitize myself and clean them up the best that I can. But you can go to YouTube and search for My Weird Record Collection, or you can go directly to youtube.com/@My Weird Record Collection. Having said all that fun stuff, here's some more fun stuff. Sounds and music used in this podcast remain the properties of their respective copyright holders and are used for commentary and review. Infringement is not intended. Yay! Isn't that fun? I offer a sincere, hearty special thanks to Tim Christ, also known as Shoebox, also known as Worm Quartet, for letting me use his record, the Pac-Man EP, as the basis, the groundwork for the logo used in this podcast's artwork. Tim and his magical music can be found on his website at worm-quartet.web.app, and I offer an equally loving, warm, huge thanks to my buddy Kevin Zerby, who took Tim's record and made logo artwork out of it for this podcast. Kevin and his music and his podcasts are available on the web at zerbinator.com, Zerbinator. Next episode, which may or may not actually be coming out in March 2026, might take some time off, spoiler alert. Since this episode was about a spoken word record and the previous episode was about an all music record, we're going to kind of split the difference and talk about a record that's kind of a hybrid spoken word music. Little hint for you, get a set of bongos. So join me as I explore that particular record in episode 29 of My Weird Record Collection. But until then, this is Sean reminding you, please support your local record store and take care of you and your mental health. Goodbye.
Baby, I'm no good for you. Now, this is psychologically a good line, because if you should ever marry him, and it turns out that way, he says, I told you so. Then, of course, there's the second line, won't you come with me to my apartment? Don't worry. I won't harm a hair on your head. He doesn't say what he'll do with the rest of the body, but not a hair on the head.